Okay, travelers and tourists, I'm going to need you all to help me solve a very important dilemma. What is the best piece of new artwork in the Starfinder 2nd Edition Player Core rulebook? Presented in the order that they appear in the book, option number 1 is what I call the Jammin' Barathu. Seriously, I think I would enjoy hanging out with this individual quite a bit. Option number 2, in a tribute to my appreciation of Superman comics, I present to you what I am terming Doomsday Vesk, because that is exactly the energy I am getting from this illustration. Up next, option number 3, is the Prismini Skittermander. There is a lot of great Skittermander artwork in this book, but this is a personal favorite of mine. And then we have option number 4, the full-page art to introduce the Mystic class. Behold this incredible illustration of Chick Chick. Next up, we have option number 5, which is this illustration of Zahir casting the spell Parallel Forms. This looks absolutely incredible. And then our final option, a simple but effective illustration of the concept of area. Someone was having some fun when they ordered this piece of artwork. Seriously, there is a ton of fantastic artwork in this book. Let me know what your favorite illustration is. Is it one of these, or was there another piece that jumped out? And join me for a Storyteller's review of the Player Core for Starfinder 2nd Edition on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello, travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller that is still calling on Paizo to give Zahir his sword back. Don't get me wrong, the lamppost is a fun illustration, but give my witch warper his sword. Come on, he needs it. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder, and welcome to a storyteller's review of the Player Core for Starfinder 2nd Edition. Now, up front, I do need to let you know, Paizo did send me a free advanced copy of the PDF for the Starfinder 2e Player Core so that I could make this review, and I definitely want to say thank you to Paizo for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it, but to let you all know up front, Paizo did not attempt to influence the content of this review or any future videos I make about this book. They did not attempt to influence the content in any way. Still, as with any review that I do on this channel, I always encourage you to try before you buy. If you can check out a product for yourself, go to your fine local gaming store, borrow it from a friend. Taking a first-hand look at a product is always going to give you the best idea of whether or not something is right for you. Still, in this video, I want to examine the Starfinder 2e Player Core from the lens of a storyteller and ask, well, what kind of stories does this book support? And how can you use this product at your gaming table to tell some great stories with your friends? I'm trying to do a better job of putting the key ideas at the front of the video, so the TLDW of this review is, it's pretty good, I guess. I'll go ahead and tell you, this is probably not going to be the most exciting review I do on this channel, and I may not be as energetic or enthusiastic for this product as I am other products that I tend to review, and that's because really this book is the Player Core. If you're going to play Starfinder 2nd Edition, you're going to need the information contained in this book. And so this book, in a lot of ways, is just kind of foundational to the Starfinder 2e experience. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Honestly, neither. It's just kind of a thing. And a lot of this book is taken up in kind of laying that necessary foundation for the overall Starfinder experience. Now, in my personal opinion, I think that Paizo has done a very good job of laying that foundation, and I can certainly see where Paizo has a lot of room to build a lot of great things on top of the foundation that this book lays, but at the end of the day, this really is a foundational book, which means it's not going to be the most exciting product. Some of the stuff in the Starfinder universe that I am the most excited about is the kind of stuff that is not going to be in the core rulebook, and it's the kind of stuff that we're going to see in future products. Does that mean that the player core is bad? Not in the slightest. Again, I think Paizo did a good job with this, but my overall review of this product is it's a solid and functional first step in laying the groundwork for Starfinder 2nd Edition. If you are interested in the Starfinder setting and you enjoy the Pathfinder 2e rule set, then this is going to be a great space opera or science fantasy style game that you and your friends can dive into. I know I'm excited about Starfinder, so I definitely intend to pick up a physical copy for myself, and I'm probably going to be running quite a few Starfinder games for my friends in the future, because this is very much a setting I know I enjoy gaming in. Still, at the end of the day, if you're taking a look at the Starfinder 2e player core, I just want to let you know up front that some of the bells and whistles of the Starfinder setting are not necessarily going to be in this book, and you may need to temper your expectations because it will take time for Paizo to properly flesh out this system. The last thing I'll go ahead and say in this section is, in a lot of ways, your reaction to Pathfinder 2e is going to be your reaction to Starfinder 2e. Your thoughts about how that game plays are going to reflect over into how this game plays. But I will say that Paizo has taken the time to take advantage of the Starfinder setting to offer some, what I would consider, interesting iterations on the Pathfinder 2e formula. So there are a few fun surprises that you can find in this book, even if at the end of the day what they're doing is laying a foundation for the larger game they intend to build. But with all that out of the way, let's get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the big picture of what this book is and how you should approach this book if you are potentially interested in picking it up. This is one of the first books that's being released for Starfinder 2nd Edition. It's not the actual first book. The first book published for Starfinder 2e is a book called The Galaxy Guide, and I actually reviewed that in last week's video. That book, however, was more of an introduction to the setting of Starfinder. If you're interested in playing Starfinder, that book kind of guides you into the setting, the factions, the people that are there, and some of the different types of adventures that you can have. If you're interested in the flavor of Starfinder, then the Galaxy Guide far and away is the place where you want to start. The Starfinder 2nd Edition player core is a much more mechanical book focused on, well, the mechanics that players are going to want to know if they want to play characters in the Starfinder setting. There's a little bit of flavor in this book. Actually, being honest, it's Paizo. They throw a pretty healthy dose of flavor in this book. But the flavor in this book is secondary to offering the Ancestries backgrounds, classes, equipment, spells, all of the different crunchy mechanical bits that you need to play the game. As should be evident in the name Player Core, this book is very much focused on the player side of the GM screen. The GM core for Starfinder 2e will be releasing in, I believe, September, and I definitely plan on taking a look at that product when it becomes available. But obviously the player core is going to be focused on the player side of the equation, and this is definitely a book that you will hand to your players and just say, look through this, have fun. There's obviously nothing in this book where you really need to be concerned that you might be spoiling something for your players if you let them see it. This is very much a player-facing product. Taking a look at the table of contents, you'll see that the player core is divided into 8 different chapters, And I think I forgot to mention this earlier, it comes in at a total length of 466 pages, which is 2 pages longer than the player core for Pathfinder 2e, so practically the same book in overall size. But the table of contents shows that this book, 466 pages, is going to be divided into 8 different chapters. The first chapter is an introduction. This should be seen more as an introduction to TTRPGs than Starfinder in specific. There's going to be some Starfinder specific content in this chapter, but this is more for people who have never played any TTRPG, the information they'll need to know. The second chapter is called Ancestries and Backgrounds. This is going to present the 10 base playable ancestries along with some versatile heritages. It's also going to talk about backgrounds that you can select for PCs and give an introduction to languages in the setting. Chapter 3 is called Classes. This is going to introduce the 6 core classes of Starfinder 2e, as well as several class archetypes and one archetype for the Starfinder Society. Then we have Chapter 4, which goes over skills in Starfinder 2e. Chapter 5 covers feats. Chapter 6 is a brief but surprisingly solid introduction to equipment for the Starfinder 2e game. Chapter 7 is going to go over spells, and Chapter 8 is going to cover the various rules and things you need to know when you're playing the game. My goal in this video is to highlight a few items in each chapter that kind of jumped out to me when I was looking through this book. As I've already mentioned, I don't think a lot of the content in this video is going to be very surprising. If you've seen the player core for Pathfinder 2e, a lot of what you will see in this video is going to be very familiar. But what I want to do is just kind of highlight a few items in each chapter that I personally found interesting, and then talk about the foundation that this book has set for Starfinder 2e. As I mentioned, Chapter 1 is your introduction, and while there is some content that is specific to the Starfinder setting, when you say introduction, you need to think of this chapter primarily as an introduction to what is a role-playing game. And you can actually see that header on screen right now. It talks about the flow of the game, what players do, what the game master does. It'll discuss key terminology that you might find inside of the game. And they even give you an example of play, all of which is designed to help someone who hasn't necessarily played a TTRPG before understand what kind of game they are playing. However, for a lot of people who have some experience with TTRPGs, this is going to be one of those chapters that's easy to skip over. They do talk through character creation in this chapter, including a step-by-step guide and illustration of how to fill out a character sheet. And starting on page 28 and 29, you're going to have some small illustrations and quick summaries of some of the major character options that are presented in this book. So on page 28, you have a picture of the 10 core playable ancestries in Starfinder 2e, as well as 2 of the new versatile heritages that were designed for this system. And then on page 29, you have a brief summary of the 6 core classes that can be found in this game. You get a 1-page discussion on how leveling up is managed inside of this game. And then starting on page 31, you get into the stuff that's actually unique to the Starfinder setting, where it begins talking about exploring the galaxy, and it talks about some of the key ideas in this setting, such as the Gap, the Pact Worlds, major planets in this setting, and the concepts of near space and the vast. The section of this chapter that's probably going to see the most use over extended play is the section on religion that introduces some of the core deities and philosophies that characters might follow in the Starfinder setting. So you can find out about deities like Abater, the Master of the First Vault, Horus, the Agent of Change, or one of my personal favorites, the new deity Lambatuin, the Polyphonic Collective, the deity of infospheres, pop culture, and memes. Yes, Paizo gave us a deity of memes. If you saw my review of the playtest for Starfinder 2e, you know I absolutely love this. It's one of my favorite additions, lore-wise, to this edition of the game. Bravo, Paizo, I love it. But this section is going to introduce the deities and offer a quick snapshot of certain mechanics that may come into effect if your character serves these deities. There are also a selection of 5 different philosophies covered in this section: atheism, the battle saints, the cycle, the green faith, and the prophecies of Calistrade. So there's a little bit of variety of religious experience that characters might fall into that are covered in this section. But moving on to Chapter 2, the Ancestries and Backgrounds, we start to dive into some of the core mechanical offerings that players have to choose from if they want to build characters for Starfinder 2nd Edition. Now, I will note, the Starfinder 2e Galaxy Guide that I covered in last week's video, they actually have a few other ancestry options in that book. So between that book and this book, Starfinder 2e is going to be launching with 16 playable ancestries, 2 base versatile heritages, and a healthy selection of backgrounds. This game's in a pretty solid starting place. If you want to decide what culture and what sort of life your character came from, Starfinder should be a setting where there is a diverse array of different types of characters just running around. And I will say that the ancestries and background options in this game are really, really solid, especially if you take this book and the Galaxy Guide together. We're not going to dive into every single option presented in this section of the book. This video is intended mostly to be an overview. I do plan to come back to Starfinder 2e after Gen Con and cover some more detailed concepts, but my goal here is mostly to give you an idea of the layout of this book and what you can expect to find. So here we have the entry for the Barathu, one of the ancestry options available in Starfinder 2e, and one of the big selling points of Starfinder 2e is just the incredible array of different types of things that you can play. Barathu are floating beings with bizarre body shapes who evolved on the gas giant of Bertheta. Barathus rewrite their own genetic code instinctively and at will, shaping their bodies into a stunning array of unique forms. Space jellyfish. Paizo is giving us space jellyfish in the first book. Bravo, Paizo, I love it, and the artwork sells this ancestry so much harder than I thought you were going to be able to do. The first page is going to give you some of the base statistics, the base hit points for the ancestry, the base size, base speed, attribute boosts and flaws, languages, traits, and any key rules that go along with that ancestry. For example, with the Barathu, here we have genetic adaptation and limited telepathy. This first page is going to lay out some of these key ideas that you want to be aware of if you're interested in playing a Barathu. And then it dives into a discussion of the Barathu in general. First up, it gives you an idea of their physical description, their society, their beliefs, popular edicts and anathema that Barathu might adhere to philosophically. Most of this is intended as a sort of cultural inspiration for characters that you're building. It gives you ideas of things that might be true about you or things that other people might think are true about you, whether or not those statements are truly accurate. Diving into the mechanical options, every ancestry will come with what's known as heritages, representing the specific type of that ancestry. So for the Barathu, you could pick up the Dreamer Barathu, the Early Stage Barathu, the Manufacturer Barathu, where you literally just brew pharmaceuticals inside of your body. Paizo gives us some really fun and weird options in this book. And then finally, the Merged Barathu. So those are heritage choices you can make for Barathu characters. And then it dives into Barathu Ancestry feats, dividing them by the level that they're available. So you have first level feats, 5th level feats, 9th level feats, 13th level feats, and 17th level feats, representing different character options that you have access to based on the ancestry you picked for your character. So, as a sample of what you could pick for the Barathu, at 13th level they have an ancestry feat called Internal Chemistry that reads, "You tweak your anatomy and bodily systems to metabolize pharmaceuticals more efficiently. Regain additional hit points equal to half your level when you restore hit points to yourself using a consumable item with the healing trait." So, Barathu, by virtue of their ability to rewrite their genetic code, can potentially make healing items that they ingest more effective. This is just one of the many options that you might pick for your character. Again, there are an incredible array of ancestry options in this section, and it would take forever to dig through all of them. This is the introduction page for the Skittermanders, which are basically my favorite ancestry ever written in any TTRPG. I love these guys, and I basically consider it mandatory that in every Starfinder game, there must be one Vesk and their Skittermander best friend that they never asked for. There's also a discussion of what's called versatile heritages. This is a mechanic that allows you to play an ancestry with a heritage that's not necessarily a normal part of that heritage. In Pathfinder, versatile heritages covered things such as the Ayavaran and the Dromar, what are more commonly known as half-elves and half-orcs in other systems, but the Ayavaran and the Dromar were presented as a way of allowing you to have a halfling who's half-orc, or mixing the half-elf heritage with something like the Amoran, the catfolk. The versatile heritage system is designed to allow some flexibility and some customization in how you design the ancestry for your character, and especially in a game like Starfinder, I think this system is a very strong selling point. One of the big draws of a setting like Starfinder is this idea of a massive galaxy that is just full to the brim of so many different types of creatures that anything you can imagine can potentially be out there. So, the Versatile Heritage system is a very strong system. It's something that plays well in Pathfinder 2e, but I think is even more important in Starfinder 2e. In this book, specifically, it talks about Borai, Prismini, and the mixed ancestry heritages. Borai are a strange mixture of living and undead, and the Prismini are mortals with a strange bond to the Drift, the plane that starships travel through to achieve faster-than-light travel. The mixed ancestry heritage is essentially a discussion of how to combine two different ancestries into a single option, if that's what you're interested in playing. Again, the sections on the Borai and the Prismini are going to be presented much as a standard ancestry would be. So physical description, society, edicts, anathema, different cultural touchstones that might be relevant to your character. But in specific, you will find the rules for the Borai as a heritage for your character, and then you will find specific ancestry feats that are available as a result of that versatile heritage. In particular, there is a type of ancestry feat that comes with versatile heritages called the lineage feat, and lineages are sort of a subcategory under heritages. So if you're playing a character that has Borai as their heritage, you could then further specify their background through something like the etheric lineage, which is represented by the etheric feat for the Borai ancestry. Not all of the ancestry feats presented for a versatile heritage are going to be lineage feats. You don't have to use lineage feats. So, for example, there's a first level feat for the Borai called Only Slightly Dead, and that feat has nothing to do with the lineage trait. Lineages are just sort of an option presented if you want to further specify the origins of your character. Next up in this chapter, you have the backgrounds, and the backgrounds in this game are going to function very much like they do in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, offering you some attribute boost, offering you skill trainings, and a starting skill feat that come about as a result of your character's background and experiences before they became an adventurer. A lot of these are going to sound very familiar to what you've already seen in Pathfinder, like the first two that are shown on this page, Artist and Athlete. However, you will pretty quickly realize that there are also going to be some Starfinder flavored backgrounds that you can take, so things like Brutaris Player, Corporate Agent. These are things that are very much embedded in the specifics of the Starfinder setting, and can be used as backgrounds for your character. One thing I really appreciate about the player core for Starfinder 2e over the player core for Pathfinder 2e is the fact that they actually include uncommon backgrounds, such as the Cyberborn background that is shown here. In Pathfinder, they just stuck to common backgrounds in the first book. I appreciate the fact that they actually present some uncommon options, because Starfinder is really a setting where some of these weirder, out of left field options should be available, so I appreciate that they are in this book. I didn't see any rare backgrounds, I don't think I overlooked any, but I do appreciate the fact that Paizo gives us both common and uncommon options in this book. I think that is a solid place to start. And of course, in this chapter, you also have a quick discussion of languages. This is literally a single page, and you could go a lot deeper on this subject, but this is a quick discussion of languages in the setting and what languages your character might know. The next chapter is Chapter 3, which covers classes, and there are 6 core classes for Starfinder 2e. Here we see a summary of them: the Envoy, the Solarian, the Mystic, the Soldier, the Operative, and the Witch Warper. Now again, we're not going to dive into all of the information for every single one of these classes, it would take way too long, but this section is going to tell you the mechanical information for how your class functions. And while I really won't talk about it in this video, it's also going to have a discussion of archetypes for Starfinder 2e and how those work. So, taking a look at one of the classes, we have the Mystic for Starfinder 2e. And again, the one-page introductory artwork for the Mystic is just awesome. You get a description of the class. You're a conduit, channeling the fundamental forces that connect and bind everything in the cosmos. You get a discussion of the key attribute for your class, your hit points. You have a sidebar with things like your proficiencies, perception, saving throws, your skills, attacks, defenses, spells, class DC. You get a brief breakdown of what you might do in combat and social encounters. It talks about what you might focus on in exploration or downtime. And then, very quickly, it moves into the class features for the Mystic. You have a table over here that demonstrates the different class features that you will pick up from levels 1 through 20. I will say I don't particularly care for these class advancement tables that Paizo uses. I don't care for them in Pathfinder 2e, don't care for them in Starfinder 2e here. I feel like these tables are just a little too cramped with information, but this is a quick reference table where you can look and see exactly what features you're going to pick up at every single level. Then, after this table, it goes through and it breaks down what all of these different features actually mean. It tells you what attribute boosts are, how your initial proficiencies work. It talks about what the connection is for the Mystic, along with their initial epiphany, Mystic Bond, the Vitality Network class feature, Mystic Spellcasting, on and on and on. Again, I'm not going to cover every single item, but you can kind of see how the Mystic class is being presented here, and every single class is going to have a similar presentation, talking about what the class is, how the class operates, and probably most importantly, discussing the class feats that you can take to specialize your character as they level up. So here we see an introduction to the Mystic feats. We have some of their first level feats, some of their second level feats, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th. This is going to go all the way through to 20th level. And as you can see on this page here, every class is going to come with a sample build that you could use as a starting point if you're interested in the class but not quite sure how you want to go about building that character. So there is a new deity in the Starfinder setting called the Newborn, and here we have a sample mystic called the Newborn Disciple. It tells you which attributes to focus on, what skills are likely to be core to your character. It gives you a suggestion on which connection to use, which feats you might want to take, and even recommends some of the spells you might pick for your spell repertoire. All 6 of these classes are going to come with a healthy array of options, and I do plan to revisit each of these classes individually to talk about what they really offer at the gaming table. Paizo has packed a lot into each of these character options, and all of these classes have some interesting stuff that you could potentially use in play. However, before we leave classes, I do want to talk about one of the stranger takeaways in looking at the player core for Starfinder 2e. And that is, there are only 6 classes: Envoy, Solarian, Mystic, Soldier, Operative, and Witch Warper. Yes, Every one of those classes comes with a wide array of options, and you can build a fantastic assortment of characters. I don't want to paint this like Paizo has made the box too small, but it's a little bit strange. You have 10 base ancestries in this book, and 6 more ancestries in the Galaxy Guide. You have a very healthy selection of backgrounds, including uncommon backgrounds in this book. It feels like when it comes to the ABCs of character creation, it's the C, the class section, that has received the least emphasis, at least in laying the foundation for Starfinder 2e. Now, in some ways, I think this makes sense. One of the big selling points of space opera or science fantasy style games is just the incredible array of different alien creatures, quote unquote, that you can potentially play. So it makes sense that Paizo, so early in the development of this game, would lean so hard into that section of character creation. It makes sense that there would be just this ridiculous array of different creatures that you could play, of different backgrounds that they might have, and in a way it makes sense that classes are not as important in this system as they feel in some other systems, even systems like Pathfinder 2e. In Pathfinder, classes feel a lot more core to your character identity, and it's not like your class is meaningless in Starfinder 2e, but it doesn't feel as critical. And it's not a bad thing in this game. It's not like I don't like it. It's just, it's kind of weird. It's not something I expected when I started going through this, but the more I read this book, the more I was like, class is not as critical to my character concept. Now, there are more classes for this game coming, and obviously Paizo is going to expand this area of the game. So, I'm not knocking Paizo here, it's just kind of in a weird spot. To give you another point of comparison, I mentioned earlier the concept of archetypes. And if you remove the class archetypes, which is how Paizo handles multi-classing, if you remove the class archetypes and just go for the other more generic archetypes that could be used with any class, things like the Starfinder agent, between this book and the Galaxy Guide, there are actually 7 archetypes that could be applied to 6 classes. Again, it's almost like the class portion of your character sheet is not quite as impactful as it would be in other games. Is it something that I dislike? Not necessarily, but it is just a little bit weird, and it is something that stuck out as I was going through this book. Chapter 4 will offer a discussion of skills in Starfinder 2e. It talks about key attributes, skill actions, skill checks, and DCs, how skill modifiers are determined. It gives some sample DCs based on untrained, trained, expert, master, and legendary proficiency. And it even talks about things like improving skills, skill increases, skill feats, what those things mean, and how things like armor might impact your skills. It gives a discussion of secret checks, and it even distinguishes between how you might use skills in encounter mode, such as a battle, versus how you might use skills in exploration or downtime mode. There is a handy chart of the different skills for Starfinder 2e, including the various untrained and trained actions that can be tied to those skills. And then the chapter will move into general skill actions that might apply to multiple skills, things such as decipher writing or earn an income, as well as actions that are tied to specific skills. So, taking acrobatics as an example, you have actions like balance, tumble through, maneuver and flight, squeeze, that are all tied specifically to rolling acrobatics for your check. And every single skill in Starfinder 2e is going to get a discussion of the core actions tied to that skill. So for example here you see computers and some of the actions that are appropriate to that skill. Here's a quick glance at intimidation and lore. Every single skill and important skill action is covered in this section so that players understand how to use their skills in play. Chapter 5 is the Feats chapter. And I'm still not sure if I should have included this kaiju battle in my contenders for best art in this book, this is also some really cool art to open the Feats chapter. But allow me to say, the Feats chapter in specific covers two types of feats that your character might take: general feats and skill feats. There are other feats that your character will get during the course of their progression. Ancestry feats and class feats most notably, but ancestry feats and class feats are in those sections of the book. So Chapter 5 Feats is specifically for general feats and skill feats that you gain access to as your character progresses. Most of these are going to look pretty familiar if you've played Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Things like Adopted Ancestry and Weapon Proficiency are things we've seen before in Pathfinder, but there's also going to be some stuff that is specific to Starfinder. So you have things like the Augmented Body General feat, or the various skill feats that are tied to the computer skill. You will see that this section opens up with some handy tables laying out what feats are available and what levels they are available at, and giving you a brief description of any prerequisites and benefits associated with that feat, before diving into the specific feat descriptions later in the chapter. So, for example, this table shows us that Advanced First Aid is one of the options under the Medicine skill feats, and if you go a little bit down, you can find the Advanced First Aid feat described in detail. Again, most of the feats in this section are things we've already seen from Pathfinder 2nd Edition. There are a few notes to have here. One thing that I do appreciate is, much like the background section, we do have some uncommon feats that are specifically offered. So Akashic Sync and Akashic Transcendence. These are both uncommon options, but they are presented in this book. Again, I do like the fact that some uncommon options are clearly presented to players. That is one of the nice touches in this product. And as I said, there are going to be options that are Starfinder specific. So for example, you have the computer skill feat Combat Hack, which gives you the Combat Hack option, and that's going to be described in this chapter as well. And again, I may revisit these in a future video so we can dive a little more in depth, but your general feats and skill feat options are going to be presented in this chapter. Next up, we have Chapter 6 Equipment. And if you happen to have seen my video covering the playtest for Starfinder 2e, I just want to let you know, this character right here is the character that my group lovingly nicknamed Vesk Nicholson, and I'm very happy to see that he showed up in the artwork for this book. But Chapter 6 is going to go over equipment, it's going to talk about credits and currency, price, equipment statistics, different type of gear that you can have. You can look over in the sidebar and see that it's going to list tech gear, armor, shields, weapons, upgrades, precious ammunition, grenades, magic items, augmentations. There is a really healthy supply of equipment in this book. One of the challenges of a setting like Starfinder is the wide array of equipment that should be available, and this book in no way covers everything that you might want for a Starfinder game, but I will give props to Paizo. They have a pretty healthy introduction, and I do feel like the equipment section of this book is a very, very solid foundation that Paizo can build on in later products. I was a little worried that the equipment section of this book was going to feel too thin, but honestly I feel like it's in a very solid place. Again, there's a lot of stuff that I want them to add down the road, but overall the amount of stuff offered here is something that I really appreciate. There's a lot of stuff I could talk about in the equipment section, but again, there's just so much that I don't want to dive into all of that right here, right now. Something I will say as a strong positive for Starfinder 2e compared to Pathfinder 2e is the way armor ends up working. Armor in Pathfinder 2e feels very generic. It's not that it's not useful, you can definitely use armor in Pathfinder 2e, it's important to have, but oftentimes the choice of armor feels secondary to the character you're actually creating. When it comes to the armor presented in Starfinder 2e, it feels a lot more varied, a lot more interesting, and it feels like you're making important choices when you are selecting between different types of armor. And one of the big reasons for this, in Pathfinder 2e, Armor had an AC bonus and a dex cap, and really those were just kind of the two main things you wanted to look at. But there is an additional statistic that shows up in Starfinder 2e called upgrades. Upgrades is a description of how many, well, upgrades you can naturally apply to a given suit of armor. So the more upgrade slots that are available on armor, the easier it is to modify to the specific utility that your character wants. And as I've already mentioned, there are armor and weapon upgrades in this book, so even in the very first book for Starfinder 2e, there's going to be plenty of things that you can choose from. Chapter 7 is going to cover spells, and this chapter is going to work just like the spells chapter that you've seen in Player Core 1 and 2 for Pathfinder 2e. If you know how spells are laid out in that system, it's going to be the exact same thing here. You get a discussion of spell slots, the difference between prepared spells and spontaneous spells, what the term heightened means. You get a discussion of cantrips, focus spells, the refocus activity, and even the larger magical traditions that surround the concept of spellcasting in the Starfinder setting. You get a discussion of how bonuses are calculated, how DCs are set, how things like range, area, and target are determined, and some discussion of important rules traits that might show up with various spells. Of course, the real meat of this chapter is going to be the spell lists themselves. First you get 4, well, spell lists, starting with arcane spells, broken down by cantrips, and then first rank, second rank, third rank, all the way down through 10th rank spells. And then after the arcane spell list, you're going to get the divine list, the occult list, and the primal list. A lot of these spells borrow from spells that already exist in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So things like the spell Magic, Enlarge, Haste, Fireball, spells that we've already seen in the Pathfinder setting are repeated in this book. Obviously, this is something that needed to be done so that the spell lists were full and proper. There's no reason for Fireball not to exist in the Starfinder setting. I will say that that does mean that this chapter is a little bit of a letdown for me. As a specific example, arcane third rank spells, they list the spell Fireball. And obviously Fireball is a spell that needs to be available. However, in the Starfinder playtest, there was another spell called Flash Fire that I really enjoyed. I had a lot of fun with that spell, and Flash Fire didn't make the final cut in this book. Now, I feel like spells like Flash Fire will probably show up in future products, but this is just a small example of how this book laying the foundation means that some of the more exciting options may not be immediately available. This is a good example of when something like that shows up. There are obviously going to be some Starfinder specific options here. So for example, the spell Skyfire Wings did actually make the jump from the Starfinder 2e playtest to the Starfinder 2e player core. You're going to have a mix of the Pathfinder spells and some Starfinder specific options, but there may be some playtest options that you've seen that don't show up in this book. Just be prepared for that. After the spell list, you're going to get a breakdown of each of the spells and all of the key rules that go into them. So for example here we have the Blur spell. It is a 2-action second rank spell with the Concentrate, Illusion, Manipulate, and Visual traits. It's available to the Arcane and Occult traditions. It has a range of touch, targets one creature, has a duration of 1 minute, and it gives us the rules text. The target's form appears blurry, it becomes concealed. As the nature of this effect still leaves the target's location obvious, the target can't use this concealment to hide or sneak. So if you saw Blur on your spell list, you could jump down here and see exactly how the spell operates inside of the game, and every single spell on the spell list is going to be covered somewhere inside of this chapter. It is worth noting that some classes, like the Mystic and the Witch Warper, have unique focus spells that are part of that class and that class only, and those spells are also going to be listed in this chapter, but they're listed in their own unique section. So for example, here are the Mystic Epiphany spells, and here's the section for the Witch Warper Warp spells. One last thing that I'm not going to dive into here, but it is included in this chapter, is ritual spellcasting in Starfinder 2e. This has all the rules for casting rituals, learning rituals, and how to use them in play. Moving on to the last chapter, we have playing the game, and this is just a big chapter of how the rules work. Starfinder 2e, like Pathfinder 2e, is broken down into 3 modes of play. Encounter mode, which is the most detailed and covers things like combat encounters. Exploration mode, which is more flexible but where you still want to be aware of the specifics of the environment. And then finally, downtime mode, a broader mode that is used to cover larger periods of time. This chapter is going to discuss the various rules that are important inside of these 3 modes of play. I do think that pages 391 and 392 are really good introductions. This is the rules overview pages, so if you want just a quick description of how things work, read through these 2 pages and you'll at least be aware of the basics. Here's a quick glance at page 392, along with a couple of game conventions, which are sort of quick application solutions if a rule is unclear for some reason. But between these 2 pages, you can get a very quick introduction to how the game works and a very good overview of the important things you want to be aware of. And then past these 2 pages, they have various sections devoted to specific elements of play. How checks are made, how damage rolls are calculated, how things like immunities, weaknesses, and resistances work. The list here could go on and on quite a bit. From my experience running Pathfinder 2nd Edition, I would encourage new players to Starfinder to check out the perception and detection pages, 425, 426, and 427. Paizo has some very specific rules on how perception and detection work, and if you're not paying attention, it's easy to mess these rules up. I originally didn't like the perception rules in Pathfinder 2e, but it was because I didn't understand them. So I know that that is an area of the game that's easy to mix up. If you are new to Paizo games, I would encourage new players to also read this section because it's one that once you get the grasp of it, it works pretty well, but it can be tricky if you're not paying attention. And of course they have specific sections on how encounter mode, exploration mode, and downtime mode work. But with all of that, we have a pretty good overview of the content you can expect to find in the player core for Starfinder 2nd Edition. As I've said, this is very much a foundational book. If you are interested in the game Starfinder, this is a book that you really want to pick up because it's core to the experience. It's in the name. Because this is a core book for the game, that does mean that this book leans a little more on the technical rather than the exciting side of Starfinder. Starfinder is a game where I really enjoy all of the creativity that Paizo tends to run wild with. Starfinder 1st Edition had some of my favorite examples of authors just being told, you know what, try it, that sounds fun. And I have seen small glimpses that tell me that that creative spirit is still going to be part of Starfinder as a whole, but this particular book is about laying the foundation so that the fun, wild world of Starfinder can properly develop, and I do feel like this book succeeds at that goal. Is it going to be the most exciting product? Probably not, but it is setting the stage for a lot of great adventures to come. And overall, I do think that Paizo did a good job of packing a lot of useful player character content into this book. Obviously, Game Masters, this book is not going to be geared towards you. There's still stuff you're going to want to know inside of this product, but I do look forward to seeing what Paizo has to offer when the GM Core drops sometime in September. That being said, the time has come for me to turn the conversation over to you. What are your thoughts about the player core for Starfinder 2e? And is there specific content in this book that you would like me to revisit in more detail in a future video? Obviously, there is a ton of stuff that I can cover here between the various ancestries and classes. There is a lot of things I could dive into, and there is definitely some content I'm pretty excited about, but I want to know what you're interested in and what questions you have. So, jump down to the comment section and let me know what your thoughts on this product are, and if you feel like there are strengths or weaknesses of this product that I have overlooked. This video should be going live the same day that I am driving up to Indianapolis for Gen Con, so if you're going to be at Gen Con, definitely reach out to me. I would love to meet you in person. The coolest part of this channel is getting to meet fellow gamers. And I'm definitely going to be trying to get some Starfinder one-shots going while I'm up there. So if you're at Gen Con, give me a shout. I would love to talk to you. But don't forget to do all of the other stuff that helps support this channel as well. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon. All of those links will be in the video description. But as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.